Captain Logan, and welcome to Pop Culture Comics in Overland Park, Kansas. It's time once again for brand new comic book reviews. As per usual, I'm going to count down my top 3 mainstream books for the week, and then I'm going to do a kids book and an indie title. Let's start it off right now with my number 3 book for the week, Carnage, number 5. So Carnage has become this huge mass, having pulled all the corpses from all the armored soldiers he slaughtered last issue into himself, and Spiderman and Iron Man have just one more issue to beat him. I still wish we'd gotten to this point a little earlier in the series, as what I suspected seems to be true. This seems to mostly be set up to return Carnage to Spidey's Rogues Gallery. But even so, this final issue is my favorite in the mini. Cletus talks a lot while he's attacking our heroes, and Zeb Wells has a pretty good sense of him, giving him that demented, taunting serial killer voice. And he's also funny in places, like when he says to Shriek, "Can I have 5 minutes to kill some dudes before you talk my ear off?" It's a story that's really more about the villains than the heroes, really. Carnage is looking for Michael Hall, who he wants revenge on for trying to experiment on him, and Shriek is just trying to make things like they were between she and Carnage during the Maximum Carnage era, which isn't working out so well for her, as Carnage seems to have better things to do. And I wonder if there's not a little bit of commentary there about this current trend of trying to do comics like they were in the 90s, and of doing stories tied to big arcs and events from the 90s, just as this one is doing. But the really interesting part for me, and really the reason I put this one on my top 3 this week, is Tannis, the psychologist who briefly was taken over by the Carnage symbiote earlier in the story, and who is now captured by Shriek and missing an arm. She's beginning to rethink her convictions as she realizes she had the opportunity to kill Carnage and is regretting not taking it. The theme of the lesser of two evils is brought to the forefront, and I won't spill what Tannis finally does with this new philosophy, but it's a little shocking. All in all, not a perfect mini, as there really isn't any big character stuff for our heroes, though some crazy stuff happens to Iron Man here. I do like the way this ends, and I'm interested to see what's done with Carnage now that Cletus Cassidy's back. A lot of good books this week. My number 2 was quite a toss-up, but I ended up going with Action Comics, number 902. Another book tied directly to major 90s stuff. This is part 2 of Reign of the Doomsdays. I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about this arc, and it just feels weird to see Superman, even with his team of Supergirl, Steel, etc., fighting off multiple Doomsdays when it only took one to kill him the first time, and these are more powerful. But nevertheless, the dialogue Cornell gives Superman this time is a vast improvement over last issue, and it's really nice to see Superman back in a big epic battle fighting for Metropolis after a year of walking around the country. The interesting twist that makes this whole thing worthwhile, and the reason I put it on my list this week, is that there's a giant doomsday killing machine that calls itself the Doomslayer. And being a big fan of this kind of over-the-top stuff in comics, I can't help but love that. It's a thinking and feeling Doomsday whose sole mission is to kill the rest of the Doomsdays, and Superman doesn't want to let him on the grounds that since he's achieved sentience, the others might have the capacity to do that as well. And of course, being Superman, he won't allow any intelligent beings to be slaughtered, regardless of their crimes. To mention much else would be to give too much away, so I'll just say that the tone of this issue gets close to the somberness of the death of Superman, and while the very idea of this story might be too ridiculous for some, the art itself is nearly worth it for me. There are a couple different artists on this issue, and I really like the contrast between the Doomsday stuff and the more human stuff with Superman toward the end of the issue. And finally, my number 1 this week, fantastic series, Silver Surfer, number 5. I was quite blown away by this. In the previous issue, Mr. Fantastic found a way to give Silver Surfer the power cosmic back so he could fight the girl that the High Evolutionary made his herald, but still allowed the Surfer to keep the persona and emotions of Norrin Radd. So now you've got a Silver Surfer who doesn't have Galactus' cosmic awareness, which adds a whole new dimension to the character. It's like seeing the Hulk with Bruce Banner's intellect for the first time. And a very unexpected thing has happened. The Surfer and the High Evolutionary's herald, the Seeker, have fallen in love, and the Surfer is supposed to stop her from helping the Evolutionary terraform the Earth's moon. Instead of looking for planets to destroy, by the way, the High Evolutionary is looking for dead planets to bring life to. Anyway, that's the setup, and I'm highly recommending this book, so I don't want to say anything else about the story. The drawing and colors are just gripping on every page. It's hard not to just stare at certain panels and take in all the detail. It's a very emotional and human story for the Surfer, and it does what the best cosmic sci-fi stories do. It's big and epic, but it's not just guys in space beating up other guys in space. It's really about something. Easily the most fun and engaging read I had this week. This week in the kids category, I chose Spider-Man Marvel Adventures, number 15. What I look for in a good kids book is a book that is, yes, acceptable and accessible to kids, but also not too dumbed down, not insulting to kids' intelligence. Challenge the kids a little with their comics, both with story depth and with language. This book is managing that pretty successfully, and it feels less like a book aimed at kids and more like a very old-school Spidey story. The plot is pretty simple. Dr. Doom attacks the United Nations building and holds it hostage with a gravity bomb, so Spider-Man has to outwit his Doombots and get the building back from him. There are some pretty typical Spider-Man tropes, like Peter just happening to be there on a field trip, but it's really the down-to-earth way people talk and Spider-Man's witty dialogue that carries the book along. Spider-Man makes a joke toward the end of the comic that made me laugh out loud. He says, "I'm really good at distracting people. I originally thought about calling myself the Amazing Distraction Man. My costume would have had a picture of the internet." In this series, Peter has a friend who knows his secret identity. No one I know, so I'm not sure who she is. I've never read this series before. Who has the power to talk to animals. And there's a running gag throughout the book where she's trying to figure out how she can possibly use that ability to help in this situation. She gets a dog, some fish, and some birds together, but it's not until the end that she has any clue what to do with them. There's a lot of humor in the book, but it's not corny, and it feels a lot like how Stan Lee wrote Spider-Man. Just a lot of harmless fun, and I recommend that from time to time, even for adult readers. And my indie book this week is Vincent Price from Blue Water. Now, I'm not exactly unbiased in reviewing this book, as it's written by my friend Cameron Cook, but I've been looking forward to this, and it is pretty cool. This one's unusual in that it's actually written in the first person from Vincent Price's perspective. He goes through his career and some of his personal life and outlines the highlights. It reads more like a list of accomplishments than a full-blown life story, and toward the end it even says, "This is but a touch of my life story, and in no way my full story." It's pretty informative, especially if you don't know much about Vincent Price, and I was happy to see a full-page spread devoted to his role as Egghead on the 60s Batman series. There is some sense of Price's personal feelings on things, especially about how the horror genre became too disgusting for him later in his career, and that's why he focused on other projects, and on how important the theater was to him. Cameron told me that Blue Water interviewed Price's daughter, so a lot of the research is firsthand. The illustrations by V. Kenneth Marion are beautiful, and I really like how he draws Price as a very mysterious and energetic figure. We get a sense that this was a great and talented man, but also a very complex man who we'll never completely know, and I think that mysteriousness is part of his charm. And other books I read this week that I think are worth your time: X-Men Legacy, number 251. The X-Men continue hunting down Legion's rogue personalities. And then there's The Mighty Thor, number 3. After the events of the Silver Surfer mini, the Surfer and Galactus show up at the fallen Asgard. And Batman Gates of Gotham, number 2 of 5. Discover the surprising secret of the Gates and Gotham's prominent families. If you're keeping up with Flashpoint, the tie-in minis that started this week are Reverse Flash, The Outsider, Lois Lane and the Resistance, which I thought was particularly good, and Kid Flash Lost. Also, the trade for Red Hood Lost Days came out this week by Judd Winnick, and also there are some new Marvel Select figures, including Gambit and Deadpool. And if you're in the Kansas City area, these are, of course, available right now at Pop Culture Comics. And if you're ever in the area, be sure you stop by here at Pop Culture Comics in Overland Park, Kansas. It's our official sponsor. It's where I am at this very moment, and it's my favorite place to get comic books. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm Captain Logan, and happy reading.